All right, on today's video, we're gonna go through setting up lifter preload, measuring push rod length, and how, when, where, and we're gonna debunk some nonsense. So stay tuned. The factory lifter system already has way too much preload. So a 7.4, a LS comes stock with a 7.4 length push rod. It's too long. It's already too long. If you actually set it up correctly, a stock LS with a normal base circle cam, you know, with whatever it is, 270-ish lobe lift, would end up needing about a 7,300 push rod. So the push rod's 100 thousandths too long. When you get up to, and the way the math works out, if the cam is done correctly, when you get to about 625 lift at the valve, that will give you, it should work out to a 7.4. So 620 to 630 lift at the valve should end up needing a 7.4 push rod. So, you know, 600 at the valve, 580 to 600 should take a 7.375, and, you know, 650 at the valve, 660 at the valve should take a 7.425. Depending on some other factors, one of them being, you know, was the block decked, was the head shaved, you know, all of that's gonna bring it down. You know, is the valve tip height correct? You know, has it had a valve job and they moved the tip height up? So all of those factors will affect push rod preload for sure. But for the most part, you know, Facebook Bob is putting a cam in his stock 5360, whatever it is. Pretty much, you can use the rule and not get in trouble. You can use the rule, you know, 580 to 600 lift is going to take a 7.375, 625 to 635, give or take, is going to take a 7.4. You know, get back down to, you know, a 550, 560 lift cam. They're going to take a 7.325 to 7.350, depending. You know, the no spring cams that we do, just like 300 lobe lift, which gives you like 500 at the valve. Those are going to be like 7.300. 7.275 to 7.300 to get you, and we tell everybody, and you know, again, this is another hot topic, but at the end of the day, any hydraulic lifter on this planet will run with 30 to 60 preload. You do not need 100, you don't need 80, you don't need 150. All of that just causes problems. If you float a valve with 100 thousandths preload, as it's trying to recover and the plunger is pumped up, there is a high likelihood of the piston hitting the valve, because now the valve is opening an extra 100 thousandths, and that's the problem with the whole deal. You know, you can run all the preload that the lifter has travel. The only problem is, if something bad ever happens, you can reduce the valve to piston clearance by ever how much preload you have. And that's why I think it's ignorant to run buckets of preload. It's not doing anything for you. And if your lifter is bleeding bad enough that you need to run the preload almost at the full travel of the plunger, then either you need a different preload, you need less spring pressure, or you should put a spacer in the plunger to limit the travel. Because if you limit the travel, you eliminate the problem of the plunger pumping up 150 thousandths or whatever insane amount of preload some of these people run. These are my opinions, but I just think it's insanity. We run everything at 30 to 60. I'd rather be closer to 30 than I had 60. But you know, again, if it's something that, you know, you've got to run a hydraulic lifter and you should be running a solid in your application, then, you know, put a spacer in it. I mean, get rid of all that travel, because it ain't your friend anyway. I mean, all that travel ain't doing anything. So anyway, having said all of that, I've got our, this is our adjustable push rod for the LS, and it works in other stuff too. It'll work in the early roller type small block Chevrolets. I mean, if you got a roller cam in a small block Chevrolet, the lifter's 300 tall, so this will work in that situation. It'll work with small block Fords and other stuff, but the range is 6.8 to 7.8, and then we've got them in 1 inch increments all the way up to, I think, 12.8. So all that's on the website if you need them. I've got it just run out there kind of close. I think we just under 7.4, 7,350 or something. So we'll bolt one down, we'll bolt this intake down and just see what it feels like. And on these, you can do it on small block Chevrolet. You don't have to do all the same nonsense you do on these, because on a Ford or a small block Chevrolet, you can just put all your stuff on and screw it out and make it be zero lash and you're there. But on these LS's, you can't get to the push rod. So we have to adjust it a little bit, take the rocker off, adjust it a little bit. But I can feel some rock in it. So the push rod is still too short to get to zero lash. So we'll pop the rocker off, we'll lengthen it a little bit, stick the rocker back on, check it again, and then once we get to zero lash, then we can measure it. And usually you can just push down on the push rod into the lifter and then screw it without having to pull it all the way back out. And that way you can adjust it and not have to keep taking it in and out and in and out. Sometimes if the lifter's dry on the head, you can put a little grease on the tip and keep it from spinning that way. And, you know, just take your time. You might have to do it 3 or 4 times to get there, but it ain't the end of the world. If you get this part right, the rest of it's not so bad. Over perfect. Man, we're right there. All right, there it is. So that's zero right there. And it doesn't matter. I mean, once you hit metal, it don't matter if you torque that bolt 10 foot-pounds or 400 foot-pounds. It's not going to change. It's not going to change the amount of preload, because we just cinching up the bolt. We're not moving the rocker. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take this out, and I mean, I got calipers, I can measure it, but I'll show you the other Army trick. All right, so that's 490, 7 and 490 is what that comes out at. Now what I have is, these have a line lasered into them, and that line, you know, when it's shut, it's together. And then what you can do is just count, one turn is 50 thousandths. So it's 6.8 closed up, and every turn is 50 thousandths. So you can just count how many turns in it takes to get back shut, and then add that to 6.8, and that'll tell you how long you are. But we 790, so I mean 490, 7 and 490. So 7.525 is what this engine needs on the intake. So we're gonna make a note of that somewhere. All right, so we'll get our exhaust in. Find all my tools here. All right, so that's 0 right there. So we'll see what that says compared to the intake. Yep, so it's the same. So the intake and the exhaust are the same length, which it should be, because the base circle on the cam is the same on both sides, and the tip height's the same, so there's really no reason why it shouldn't be. One other thing while we're discussing it, and I got my cameraman back. So we see talk on these forums about, come back over here, about geometry, and people's telling them, you know, the change the push rod length and it's going to change the geometry. So just to put that nonsense to bed, the only thing that can, there's two things that can change the geometry of this rocker system: moving this fulcrum up and down, or moving this valve tip up and down. I don't care what you do to that push rod, this rocker arm is not moving. Whatever, you can do whatever you want to, and that rocker arm is not going up or down. This location of this trunnion, or the pivot point, whatever you want to call it, and this pivot point here, those are the only two things that's going to affect geometry. And like with a, you know, this has got a fixed stand, so you can't do it, but like with a standard head with a removable stand, we can move that stand up or down if we need to tweak the geometry for any reason, especially with like an aftermarket roller rocker arm. But with a standard rocker system, this is it. You just can't move the geometry for the most part. So, you know, hopefully all that makes sense. And then, like I say, you know, sometimes you have to round, because just like we're, you know, we're 490. You know, if we were 500, push rods, we sell push rods, and pretty much everybody else does too, in 25 thousandths increments. So if we were 7,500, then we would have to go to 7,550 to get that 30 to 60. But because we're 490, you know, 7,525 is going to give us 35 preload, which is just absolutely perfect. So it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you have to go to the high end. Sometimes you're on the low end. But I mean, 25 would work, right? So we could, if it was the you know, rounded up to 500, and then we went to a 525 push rod, it would be perfectly fine, right? But you know, some stuff moves around and there's some variance in the system, but if you know that your system has no variance, like we know that this thing is going to be dead nuts all the way around because we machined it square, we checked everything, but everything's not like that. So especially like a perfect example is a FE Ford. We had a guy call, needed a set of push rods, and he checked all 16. And because, you know, valve tip heights and people don't do a good job when they do a valve job, his push rod length varied on 16 valves like 40 something thousandths. I mean, that's crazy. But that's the kind of stuff you have to deal with, you know, when you got problems with the machining. But anyway, so hopefully that made sense, and you know, it can help you make a correct decision on push rod length and how the system works and why it works that way. You got any ideas or questions, put them in the comments. We appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one.